For 40 years, I was paid to have certain habits. The day I retired, I discovered they were the very things costing me my peace of mind. I really thought retirement would be this long, satisfying exhale after a marathon, but it wasn't. My first 6 months felt like a permanent, terrifying Sunday night. You know that feeling? That low-grade panic that buzzes just underneath everything, telling you you're not ready for the week ahead. Except there was no week ahead. There was just Tuesday, and I was still buzzing. Logically, I knew I'd earned the rest, but my body didn't get the memo. I felt profoundly guilty just sitting still, reading a book. My mind was still a frantic checklist, but the deadlines were imaginary now. And I had this thought, and it sounds ridiculous saying it out loud, but I thought to myself, I think I'm failing at retirement. It's an absurd idea to fail at doing nothing, but the feeling was real, and it was persistent. And it's what forced me to understand that the person I had been for 40 years simply wasn't equipped for the life I had now. The real turning point, the moment the floor fell out from under me, happened about a year in. My daughter, she's in her 30s, had bought one of those simple bookshelves that comes in a flat box. She asked if I'd help her put it together. And for me, that was like a siren call, a project, something with a clear beginning, middle, and end. So I went over, and immediately I was in full project manager mode. I was timing the steps. I was critiquing the bad diagrams in the instruction manual. I was explaining how we could optimize the workflow if we laid out all the screws first. I was unbearable. And after about 20 minutes of this, she just quietly put her screwdriver down. And she looked at me, not with anger, just with a kind of sadness. And she said, "Dad, I don't need a manager. I just wanted to spend some time with my father." It wasn't an accusation, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. Right there, in her living room, with half a bookshelf on the floor, I saw it. I had retired from my job, but I hadn't retired from the mindset. I had brought the worst parts of my office home with me. The urgency, the obsession with efficiency, the need to be in charge. And they were poisoning the very relationships I had retired to enjoy. I was so busy trying to be useful that I had forgotten how to just be present. And I started to realize this feeling of failing at retirement. It wasn't just in my head, it was leaking out. It was affecting the people I loved most. I later read a study that said about 1 in 3 adults over 50 report feeling lonely. And I thought, how much of that loneliness is a side effect of us forgetting how to connect without also trying to manage or fix or improve everything around us? It was a brutal question to ask myself, and it's what led me to take a hard look at the habits I had spent a lifetime building. And that hard look wasn't easy. It was humbling. I started to see how the very things I once considered my greatest strengths, that drive, that efficiency, that need to fix everything, had become traps. They were habits built for a boardroom that were breaking my heart in my own living room. Slowly, I began to identify them. 4 of them, really. 4 deep-seated patterns that I had spent 40 years perfecting, and that I would now have to spend my retirement unlearning. So what I want to do now is simply walk you through what I found. Not as some guru on a mountaintop, but as someone who's maybe just a few steps ahead of you on the exact same road, trying to find his way. The first thing I had to confront was this deep, grinding need to be productive, to have something to show for my day. In that first year, I threw myself at my backyard. It became my new full-time job. I built a stone path. Then I decided it needed a retaining wall. After that, a whole new deck. My neighbor, a good guy, leaned over the fence one afternoon and said, "Looks great. What are you going to do when you run out of yard?" I laughed and said something like, "Maybe I'll start on yours." But his question just stuck with me. It haunted me, because I realized I wasn't doing any of it out of a love for gardening. I was doing it because I was terrified of what would happen if I stopped. I needed to show my wife, my neighbors, myself, that I was still producing something tangible. The day I finished the deck, I put the tools away, got a beer, and sat down to admire my work. And I didn't feel an ounce of satisfaction. All I felt was a rising tide of panic. And the only thought in my head was, okay, what do I produce tomorrow? If you feel that same sense of guilt, that emptiness at the end of a day where you just read a book or took a long walk, please know this. You are not lazy. You're not broken. You are just running a powerful piece of mental software that you didn't even know was installed. An old idea that says our worth is tied to what we produce. And we have to be the ones to consciously shut that program down. But it wasn't just this need to be busy with big projects. It was a more insidious moment-to-moment problem. Which brings me to the second habit. The second habit I had to face was this constant, grinding sense of urgency. For 40 years, my life ran on alarms. An urgent email, a phone call from a client, a last-minute meeting. And my body learned to react to those alarms with a jolt of adrenaline, a shot of cortisol. It was a survival mechanism. The problem is, in retirement, the alarms stop, but your body keeps listening for the fire bell. I remember standing in the kitchen one afternoon just making a sandwich. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was just a text message, but I lunged for it. My heart was pounding, and I actually smeared mayonnaise all over the screen trying to see who it was. It was my brother sending me a picture of his cat, a cat photo, and my body had reacted to it with the same fight-or-flight response I once reserved for a message from the CEO. It was unsettling. I was a firefighter who kept hearing sirens long after the fires were out. And if you feel that, if your heart races when the phone rings, or you feel this itch to clear every single notification the second it appears, you're not being neurotic. It's just that your nervous system is still running a program it learned for survival in a world that doesn't exist anymore. Neuroscientists have shown what this state of constant low-grade alert does to us. We're marinating our brains in stress hormones, even when the source of the stress is a cat picture. Learning to slow down my own reactions was one thing, but then I had to face how that sense of urgency was spilling out and affecting the people around me. And that led me to the third habit I had to break, the habit of unsolicited problem solving. Many of us built our careers on being the person with the answers, the go-to guy, the fixer. It's a hard identity to let go of, and it tends to morph into trying to solve problems for our spouses, our friends, our adult children, problems they never asked us to solve. My son, he's in his 30s, casually mentioned over the phone one day that he was having trouble with a leaky faucet. Before he could even finish his sentence, I was in full project mode. Okay, first you got to shut off the main valve. Do you have a good basin wrench? You should probably just replace the whole fixture while you're at it. I can send you a link to a good one. He just went silent on the other end of the line. And then he said very quietly, "Dad, I was just going to say I'm calling a plumber." I wasn't helping. I was managing. I was taking away his chance to handle his own life in his own way, because my brain is just addicted to fixing things. And look, if you find yourself getting frustrated that your loved ones don't just take your obviously correct advice, I get it. It feels like a rejection. But I'm learning that it's often just their quiet plea to be allowed to be competent adults, to find their own solutions, even if it means making a few mistakes along the way. This habit of managing others was about my interaction with the world. But the final, and maybe the most important habit I had to abandon, was purely about my interaction with myself. It was the habit of devaluing small joys. In a career, you learn to ignore the little moments. A cup of coffee isn't for savoring, it's fuel. A walk isn't for noticing the trees, it's for getting your heart rate up. We get so focused on the big goals, the promotion, the product launch, the retirement date, that we lose the ability to just enjoy a simple, unproductive moment. My wife, she loves to just sit on our front porch in the late afternoon. For the first 2 years of my retirement, it drove me absolutely nuts. I'd join her, but I'd last about 5 minutes before I'd start fidgeting, check my phone, and say something like, "Okay, what's next?" Or, "I should really go organize the garage." One day she just looked at me, not with anger, but with this incredible calm, and she said, "There is no next. This is it. This is what we worked for." So I sat back down, and I tried. I just sat. I listened to the neighborhood sounds. I felt the breeze. It was the most unproductive 10 minutes of my day. And I realized, with a shock, that it was the first time I had felt genuinely peaceful all week. If the idea of sitting still for 10 minutes with no goal, no phone, no purpose, if that sounds like a kind of torture, I promise you, you are not alone. It's the sign of a mind that's been perfectly trained for a world you don't live in anymore. Learning to value those small moments, that was the final piece of the puzzle for me. It's the thing that ties all the other pieces together. So where does all this leave me today? Am I some Zen master sitting on my porch, completely at peace with the universe? Absolutely not. I'm a recovering workaholic. That's the most honest description I can give you. The old wiring is still there. Some days it hums louder than others. Just last week, I caught myself mentally drafting a 3-point plan to optimize how we load the dishwasher. And I had to just stop, look at the soap-covered plate in my hand, and laugh. The difference is, now I recognize the hum. I can feel that old urge to manage, to fix, to hurry, and I don't have to obey it. I can just name it. "Ah," I can say to myself, "there's the old urgency habit." And by naming it, it's like shining a little bit of light on it. It loses its power. It goes from being a commander to being just a suggestion. A bad suggestion, usually. Peace for me isn't a permanent state. It's not a destination I've arrived at. It's the ongoing practice of choosing. It's the ability to sit on that porch and feel the itch to go organize something, and to choose, just for this moment, to stay seated, to choose the breeze, to choose the quiet. I still have days where the old anxiety buzzes. I still sometimes feel a jolt of panic when I wake up on a Monday morning with nothing on the calendar. The work of unlearning is never really finished, but the moments of peace are getting longer. They're getting more frequent, and I'm learning to accept that this is what it looks like. It isn't a perfect, flawless state of calm. It's this messy, beautiful human process of noticing the old habits and gently, kindly choosing a different way. And maybe for people like us, that's what peace has to be. So I go back to where I started, this idea that for 40 years I was paid to build certain habits. I've come to see it as a kind of power plant. I spent a lifetime building this massive power plant inside me, engineered to run an entire city, my career. And it was a good plant. It was efficient. It did its job. But the city doesn't need all that power anymore. And the real work of retirement, I'm learning, isn't to find a new, smaller city to power. It's the slow, quiet, careful job of decommissioning the old plant, of walking through its vast, silent halls and shutting down the turbines one by one. The turbine of productivity, the turbine of urgency, the turbine of unsolicited fixing, the turbine of ignoring small joys. It's not about demolition. It's not about regretting the structure you built. It's just about letting the noise finally die down so you can begin to hear the quiet that's been there all along. The goal of my career was to be productive. The goal of my retirement is simply to be present. It turns out the second is much harder and infinitely more rewarding. I would genuinely love to know if any of this resonates with you. Of these 4 habits we talked about, which one do you feel most in your own life? You don't need a solution for it. Just naming it is such a powerful first step. Let me know down in the comments. And if this kind of conversation is something you could use more of, then I hope you'll stick around. We have a lot more to talk about.